it might, like, what you're doing might make sense in the context of your first-person perspective, whereas if you look at somebody else's perspective, you're a flaming idiot, or you're throwing. All
All
right.
right. Tell us about this Hollywood game.
It was horrible.
Excellent.
A good place to start.
I just feel like we didn't push at all, and I wasn't able to get any shots in as McCree, and just wanted to see what we were doing wrong, but we got completely rolled.
Okay.
All right. Sounds like we'll have a lot to work with.
Standard kind of introductory questions. How long have you been playing Overwatch?
I've been going on and off. Last time I played was 3 years ago, but this past 2 months I've been playing a lot. So,
well, welcome
just trying
back.
to hop in.
Hopefully you're enjoying it. Things have changed a lot in the last 3 years or so, but
Yeah.
and what SR are you at during this video?
2.1K.
Okay. And do you have any specific goals that you're trying to accomplish in Overwatch? Have some fun, rank up to a specific rank, go pro, anything like that?
Probably rank up to like plat or diamond.
All right. Sounds good.
Attackers incoming. Will defend objective A.
Is there a particular reason you locked McCree on this map for defense here, or just comfortable hero, good for the comp, that kind of thing?
I'm just trying to get better as McCree, so I just play him all the time.
Right on. Okay. I guess to start things off then right away, I would have liked to see you starting on this high ground that we call Juice, where we see that little spray up there and the lawn chairs. Just using that high ground. So right now, we're basically at a pretty much purely neutral fight. Neither team has a good positional advantage. We're matching front lines. Both back lines are fairly safe. What you can do by manipulating the high ground here is be able to shoot over the Reinhardt shield and threaten backline members so that they will either be forced to deal with you by sending someone like a Genji to come and duel you, by trying to get some poke in on you and force you back. But at the very least, you'll be stalling their time, if not doing a lot more, like getting more damage in, slowing them down, and building up your ult surge and potentially leading into kills. Right now, by starting with your backline, yes, you're a lot safer, but you don't need to start in the safest position possible. You should start in the most aggressive position possible and then gauge how much threat you actually have before falling back. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So if they had like a Hanzo or a Widow, you'd probably not hold up there for very long without any cover. If they had like a full dive comp like Winston, Diva, Genji ready to jump on you, you'd probably fall back. But seeing this composition, the only real threat to you is like some poke damage from the enemy McCree and Ana, and then the potential for Genji to dash at you. And as long as you play smart, you should be able to avoid some poke damage, at the very least not die to it, maybe be forced out to it, and be able to outplay the Genji from the range you have.
Okay. Is it usually throughout the game, should I be sticking around Ryan or should I be flanking?
It's very much going to depend on the composition, right? So, were you watching the previous review?
I watched about the last half.
Okay, so part of that was we were talking about where the enemy was a main tank, and they were very much focused on the main tank. So it's going to depend where you're strong, right? If you have the advantage and your Reinhardt needs the help to play with the front line, then you can play with the front line. But if the back line is getting a lot of value in because they have like a Zenyatta or a Baptiste or something like that, and if you play on a high ground or a flank, you can threaten to get kills basically on squishier targets, then that's going to be a lot more value there. So it's going to be depending on basically where your composition is strong compared to where the opponent's composition is strong. So if you have more shield break, if you need to play with your Reinhardt in order to flash his shield so that your Reinhardt can get a shatter, if you need to play with your team because you've got a Zenyatta or something that's playing up close and you need to defend them against a Genji or a Tracer you can play with, depending on the hero. Like if the flanks or if a high aggressive angle is going to be threatened, like Tikatee was talking about with a Widowmaker or Hanzo, you can't do that and you are just kind of required to play. But it's going to be very, very situational. There's not going to be like one piece of advice that's going to be able to identify when you should be playing with your main tank and when you should be in a more aggressive flanky position.
Okay, so it's highly situational.
Very much so.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
you know, I hate to give it like a depends answer, but
Yeah.
in this situation, just because of what Lou mentioned, it would probably be better to be on that high ground.
Okay.
So the two things I check for when deciding whether to play more team oriented or more flank oriented, especially for someone like McCree who kind of commits himself to one of those choices during a fight and not can't move between both, is one, the composition matchup. Right now, you're basically in sort of a mirror where you have the same tank lineups on both sides. You got McCree on both sides. You should expect a similar frontline threat from both teams. In these cases, you need to think about whether your team's going to be going aggressive during this fight or the enemy team is going to be going aggressive. If your team is going aggressive, it's probably better to move with your team so that you're able to occupy and threaten the same space that your tanks are doing. But if your tanks are under a lot of pressure, like for example, if your Rhine shield's lower than the enemy Rhine shield, or if they have ultimates they're about to use, and you're expecting them to be pushed back, you can use that attention that's on your tank line to find flank opportunities. So, for example, in this kind of situation, if your front line's about to give up this corner and they're about to round the corner to point, you could look for a time to flank up to the high ground instead of just sitting behind your Rhine shield that's about to break and pumping some bullets into the enemy Rhine shield, which where they have advantage anyway. You're not going to win that resource fight. So look to take a different resource, in this case, the high ground, and use your positioning instead of your frontline pressure to win that fight. The other thing you need to think about if you're not in a mirrored ish composition is what your team is better at. And this is something we talked about in the last VOD as well. But your team comp right now is fairly brawly. Even the Torb and having Moira as a healer, you want to stay relatively close. If they were playing something like a dive comp, you'd probably be very limited in your flank potential because they'd be able to get on you and your team would not be able to support you. If they're playing something more pokey and slow, that's even slower than your composition, then you could probably set up more flanks because they're less able to punish those things. I guess a little bit scary if they're running stuff like Hanzo or Widow, like we said. But think about the mobility potential of both teams. If you are less mobile than the enemy team, you can probably flank less. If you are more mobile than the enemy team, then you can probably flank more, just as a general rule.
Okay.
Ooh, this is really risky positioning. So what's happening right now is you see your front line sort of giving up a little bit of space. They're sort of weaving in and out based on their bubbles, based on Rhine shield. What you're doing right now with this positioning is you're giving yourself no way out. At the very least, I'd like to see you playing towards that what we call dark, sort of this area here, so that you at least have a choke point you can hide through. Maybe get some line of sight to your Ana to heal you up. There's a mini pack back there as well that you can get in case someone like this Genji decides to go duel you. But the safest option in this situation would be to play the same line of sight as your backline, your Ana, in this case, and just play behind shield so that when your Rhine gets pushed back, even if without his shield, he's still between you and the enemy team. Right now, there's nothing between you and the enemy team, and you have no way out, and there's a hat halfway through your head. So there's a lot going on.
That's the worst part. And so yeah, so it's like this situation, you like again with the not having a retreat, but it also puts you in the sight lines. And one of the things is that one of the great parts about this position is that if somebody does come to try and push you in, their back is to the rest of your team, and if they try and push into your team, then their back is to you and you're free. So this is a really good position because even though you're separated from your team, like you have an Ana, you know, like your Torb and your Moira are going to be able to help you with anybody who's fighting you. Whereas here, one of the things that makes it even worse is that you break line of sight, and you can see this Ana trying to move forward to heal you. So this can be kind of like setting up a little bit of a pincer, whereas falling directly back with your team is just staying as a little bit more of a cluster. So both would be fine decisions, but staying in the middle where they have, like the opponent has more sight lines on you than your team has the ability to support you is going to be a very dangerous one.
This is very much the same concept that I was talking about, using the high ground where your front line gets pushed back. So they have the choice, the enemy team, of either pushing your front line into the point, in which case you have a great angle to do a bunch of damage, shoot them in the back, or they have a choice of trying to flush you out, in which case they expose all of their members to the rest of your team on point. They can't do both with their Rhine shield. So no matter what, something is going to be getting value around the Rhine shield. And that's the sort of purpose of those kind of flanks.
Yeah, and even if you do trade out, like if they invest a lot of resources to take you out, it's very, very unlikely that if your team is competent, they'll get away with that without trading or losing more members than they took to lose you. So it's like you're not invincible. If they do overcommit to killing you, they'll probably succeed, but they'll lose the team fight to do so, which is okay. So this is kind of like a higher level thing. So I'm just going to say this for chat's benefit. But this is sort of the thing where I recommend if there's the 4-box method, if you're going through and you're kind of like looking for, like, why did I die? Was it because of positioning? Was it because of game sense? Was it because of mechanics? Where at the higher elos, if you're kind of like trying to self-coach in like the Masters or Grandmasters area, that's the sort of thing where you're looking for, where even if you do some sort of like play where you bait the opponent to commit to you, you die, but in the process they trade off like 2 kills, then it's like you died, but you won the team fight. So looking for these situations where, it's like you're at lower elos, you can almost exclusively care about you dying, but at higher elos, it's going to be all about these team fights. So, I just wanted to reiterate that going here does definitely put you in a situation where you can get punished in a way that you won't survive it. Like, you've got a mini, and you've got the retreat, so you can, if you're here, you can roll and then take a few steps and be at the mini. And if you've got one person, they have to basically walk straight lines at you. You've got a massive advantage in that duel. But if they come at you with Rein and Zarya, and speed, which they don't have right now, but if theoretically they did, they would kill you. But hopefully they would take more damage, including just having more of their team be eliminated in that process.
Looks like we're doing an okay job stabilizing. They throw in a nano.
It ain't my time.
The nano was too much. So yeah, like we're saying, it's not the worst thing in the world that you went down there, but they didn't spend enough. They should have had to spend more in order to find that kill on you, basically.
Yeah, I got caught in a bad position.
Yep.
And a lot of that can be fixed just by being more decisive before the fight actually breaks out. Being more informed about what kind of things are coming up, as well as just making a decision faster about where you want to be positioned and where you want to fight from. You're really keen on these duels, but your team right now is at disadvantage with, I think it was either Reinhardt dead? He's still coming back? This is a really risky spot to be in. Yeah, your Reinhardt's still coming back from spawn. If they were more coordinated right now, they would be pushing 6 people all up on you guys and just killing you one by one. Your Zarya, your Ana, your Torb. That big of a man advantage is pretty huge. It looks like they're opting to take high ground space instead, which of course is also good for them. So I would like to see a lot safer play during this time. At the very least, not committing to that duel on the Genji, like committing more to getting out during that time. Yeah, getting staggered here is just going to be really, really bad if it happens. Luckily, we're okay. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying, like, we were so uncoordinated that I didn't even know what was going on, so I was just playing at my worst here.
I mean, this is low gold, so that's probably going to be the majority of situations, right? But it's you can do your best to call it out in comms or to just play safe yourself. But yeah, it's one of those things where if either you're doing a duel like that or you see somebody else being aggressive like your Zarya, it's going to be one of those situations where one person doing something dumb is a mistake, 2 people doing something dumb is a strategy. So if you can't communicate and the rest of your team is holding up, then you may as well die with the team, sort of thing. It's gonna cost you, because like really, especially when you're talking about like escort or hybrid maps, the thing that you're really fighting for, it's not eliminations, it's not team fight wins. Like at the end of the day, the thing that you're really fighting for is time, right? So if you are gonna get wiped, then you may as well get wiped as early as possible. So if somebody's playing aggressive and they're going to kill that person, and then they're going to kill you, and then they're going to kill the people who are respawning and get really staggered, you may as well just die with the person on the front line and try and get as much damage in as possible. So it's not always going to be it's not always going to be feasible in a ranked game to get your teammates to play intelligently.
Oh,
so close.
Tragic.
So close.
He had it like 0.25 seconds earlier.
Yep.
I guess what's your thinking around High Noon as an ultimate? What kind of situations do you want to use it in?
Oh, you're asking me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I use it to get a couple of picks, mostly when Pharah flies up. Yeah, I don't consider it usually like a wipe situation. I'm mostly to get a pick or two or push them back. But yeah, I just submitted my, like, I thought like probably one of the worst games so I could get the most feedback out of it.
Fair enough.
Gotcha.
Do you want to talk about a high noon situation? Did you have one in mind, Lou?
I was just going to relate it back to the idea of when your front line's taking pressure, you can use something like High Noon or any sort of big burst damage ultimate, really. Baptiste Window is another great example. Moira Coalescence is a good example. Nano can be a good example to ease that pressure and turn it more in your favor. So, for example, like on First Fight, instead of trying to find a flank to find value on enemy backline when they push in, you can just counter enemy frontline aggression by proccing High Noon. And ideally, it's at a point where they've already overextended and committed themselves to a fight. So that usually means cooldowns are being used, like Zarya bubbles, like you said, Pharah using boosters, means they've committed to some sort of space or some sort of engage. And then what you're doing with High Noon is you're turning the tempo on its head. And all those cooldowns they just used to get aggressive are now null and void, because if they continue their aggression, they're just standing in your High Noon range. And they hopefully don't have enough resources to kite out into the space. And at the very least, you've thwarted an aggressive push. And ideally, if you time it perfectly and get all the right resources out before proccing it, then you get kills. And it's in a situation where they don't really have counterplay because they weren't ready for it. They were making their own aggressive play, and then you just turn that on its head. So the situation we just saw, we already had a huge advantage. And I don't think High Noon was going to be the difference maker, whether or not we lost that fight or won that fight. I think we won that fight regardless of what happens with High Noon. So I would have liked to see you save it there, because it was already our tempo. We were already moving aggressively, and we already had a pretty big advantage. We want to use it where either we're at disadvantage and they're over aggressing, or when at the very least we're giving up some space and they're coming into us, sort of thing. That's my opinion, the easiest way to use High Noon.
Okay. Flashes are on point.
I mean, he got nanoed.
Yeah.
Not a lot.
Got a
you
bubble
could've done
initially
there.
too.
Even if you land the flash on a nanoed Genji, it's going to slow him down, but without coordination, it's not really going to stop him. Ooh. I love it! Your Ryan saved your ass with the counter charge, but I still love it.
We take it.
We take those.
So a lot of these fights, a big part of the reason we're losing is because we're not really taking any position between the fights. For example, we just won that fight when you high nooned, but we all just kind of stayed on the ground in the corner, and then Genji had no problem taking high ground, setting up for a blade, getting nanoed, going deep. If you, particularly as McCree, can set up in a way that's sort of disconnected from your tanks, either on longer sight lines, or on high grounds, or on short flanks and stuff like that, you make those setups a lot harder for the enemy team. So the way you're playing with your tanks right now is really good for pressuring out the enemy tank line, but it's not good for denying any sort of aggressive setups from their other members, like their Genji, or even their McCree. So in this case, because their Rhine got nanoed, we lost that frontline fight anyway, even though you got a good flash off, you got some good damage on the Rhine, they had nano to stabilize, and then you basically couldn't do anything from there, right? You were committed to that fight, where if you had gone the sort of short right, where those boxes are, that little doorway, you'd have a good angle on the Rhine, you'd be able to hit the same flash, you'd be safe to the enemy high noon. Yeah, this right here. This is a great little short flank you can do. And it's not like you're overextending by taking this space either. You got a mini, you can fall back to your team through that doorway. And it's just much safer sightlines, and you're doing the same job but you're also disconnected from your tanks, so that even if your tanks lose the fight, you're still valuable.
Okay, I see.
And one of the situations, like, you're using Fan. I'm a huge fan of Fan the Hammer, because if you could catch somebody off guard, like, this is one of those situations where it's like, if you go in and trade with like an Ana or something, it's like you commit to it, you roll into the team, you flash their Ana, you fan their Ana, like, you've traded one for one, right? But in this situation, that trade is in your favor, not only because the Ana is probably more valuable than you because of the amount of healing and sustain that's required, but also because of the spawn distances, and that you're going to be back to the fight way faster. Is that, like, that trade, just in terms of the time that they're out of the fight, is in your favor as well. So one of the things about being in these positions is that you can absolutely go in and trade for one, or like hope to get 2 sort of thing. But this is where you're going to have to put a little bit more thought into kind of like, who am I trading? You're probably going to have to think about it in advance, because there's going to be some things where it's like, if you go in and like, yeah, there's going to be some situations where trades are not in favor, but if you do pick the right target, like a BAP with a lamp or an Ana with nano or something like that, those trades can be massively impactful, even if the spawn differences aren't so massive. So, but yeah.
Yeah.
Did you have any questions?
No, not really.
I do really like this flank because you're really close to high noon, and yeah, like this is a great position so far.
As long as we can touch. Oh, almost got the kill, and now... Okay. I'm guessing you were scared of the Genji?
Probably. I'm telling you, I wasn't even thinking this game. I was just frustrated, so I just thought, just send this one.
The Genji does look pretty good for this elo.
I think
he's doing the right things for sure.
Yeah.
My friend, the Ryan Jar Jar is in high plat, so I think we're versing plats here.
Oh, so you are playing up elo a little bit.
A bit above.
I think so, yeah.
Yep. So that position.
So it's important.
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. You can go first.
I was saying that like that position was really great. Like you hit the shots on the Kree. Like you definitely had it in your mind. It looked like you were playing like you had it in mind that you wanted to high noon. And I think that from what it looked like watching it, it was like you were trying to get the shot specifically to build high noon, and then use the high noon as soon as you got it, sort of thing. And there is a little bit of a danger to pre-planning too far ahead. Is that if the situation changes, it can be hard to adapt. And this happens quite often. I'm also pretty prone to this one. It's one that I've had to fight with I've had to fight with in my own game gameplays where I go in with a plan, and then the plan doesn't happen, and I'm like stunned for a second, or like something happened, and I've thought too far in advance, and I'm like I've put this series of actions into motion, but as soon as it goes off script, I look so dumb because things didn't go as I planned. So this sort of situation where you have to be like go up with the idea that this is going to be a good position for a high noon, but that you're going to try and find a pick on a squishy, not just like blindly shoot sort of thing, where you do want to kind of still have, I suppose, like a decision tree rather than a direct chain of actions, because you could have gotten...
no script.
Yeah, there is no script. Like, no plan survives first contact with the enemy sort of thing. I'm a walking cliche. But like you can get the pick on the McCree, and then at that point you could decide if you even needed to use the high noon. Sort of the situation where, as soon as you got the McCree low, you didn't continue to try and get that pick on the McCree. The Genji went up, and it looked like you were kind of struggling between these two impulses to like turn and fight the Genji and duel him, but then like in your head you were up here to high noon, so you proceeded with the high noon plan even though you were very low, and like the improvisation was jump off the high ground while high nooning and low without looking at the Genji, and that's where things went off the rail. So that's what it looked like to me, and I kind of recognize this because it happens to me all the time as well, where like I try and commit to something and it just like goes off the rails. So viewing these as kind of like setting yourself up to have the opportunity to high noon, rather than kind of going up to high noon, sort of thing. So, but yeah, I very much relate to that. This is something that I struggle with a lot, is planning too far ahead and then getting fucked by it because things go differently.
I think that's exactly what happened. I just wanted to high noon.
Yeah, I was watching back my YouTube video from this morning in Pugs. It was sort of thing where I had planned out this this situation. I think I can actually pull it up. This is going to be a little bit of a tangent, but it'll be quick, I promise. I always get so self-conscious when I watch myself play, but where is it? It's right.
I will say too, though, you mentioned getting frustrated in a game like this. It's important that, obviously, even though these plays don't work out, to keep making plays and keep playing the game
for sure.
Proactively. You don't want to just get downtrodden and feel like you're helpless and stuff like that, and just like resign yourself to, okay, I'm just going to sit behind Ryan Shield. You still need to react to every situation differently, and even though something doesn't work out one time, doesn't mean it's not going to work out the next time. To your defense in this situation, this was a very hard fight to win. It would take a hero high noon to turn this fight in your favor anyway,
Absolutely.
because of how much they were steamrolling you guys. So panicking a little bit is understandable. Not making the play happen is understandable. They did a good job of denying the play that Genji did. So it's not the end of the world if this play doesn't happen. But what you don't want to do is like give up on future similar plays just because it didn't work out the first time.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I'm just trying to work on that.
Yeah, and it takes time, right? You know, there's so many things like it's where a lot of these things are going to be kind of conscious things, and you have to decide to do them. And it's one of those things where just because it doesn't work the first time that you do it doesn't mean it's not going to work the 100th time after you've done the practice and gotten like the feel for how it is. But so I found the segment that you'll probably have to look at the actual stream for this.
And then as soon as you
but
go...
the context for this situation was that I had planned out to do like the Doomfist was going into the back line. I was going to bubble him. He was going to go hard, like use all 3 cooldowns to fight, and then go into Meteor Strike instead of using two cooldowns and 1 to escape. But I was watching this back. So our Doomfist goes in, right? And then he goes up, and then I grab. But you'll notice, like, after this, I stand still and stop shooting, because I think that the fight is won here. So it's like right here, right? I'm just looking at the graph, because I've done my job. We should be set up to a victory here. But, I mean, there's a lamp right in front of me I could be shooting. I could be trying to, like, break the Reinhardt. I could be trying to right-click sort of thing, where it's like, this is where I've planned too far ahead, and I have assumed that, like, everything went the way that I had planned it out, and I assumed at this point...
My job is done.
My job is done, right? And then the Doom panicked and Meteor Striked somewhere else, and then I'm like, wait, we are in trouble now. So this is something that, this is definitely something that just comes with practice. It is a little bit of a multitasking thing where you are definitely going to want to have the main line of, like, the main decision tree that you're trying to chase towards victory, but you have to be adapting. You have to be basically getting insurance or hedges against your plan failing, because even in the Overwatch League, there are times where these full ultimate trades. This happened all the time in GOATs. Remember GOATs when people would trade like 11 ultimates and people would still be alive?
Yeah, and no one would die.
And no one would die. And then it would just be a brawl, and things would just go off the rails entirely. So, yeah, it's going in, ready to adapt to the plan, or like ready to continue fighting, even if the plan does not succeed decisively. These are all important things, but they're like it's very hard to do that while learning to do these new things, like putting on flank high noons, like these flank angle, like rolling in and trading backline supports, things of that variety. And you are going to have to spend some time in rank just specifically focused on trying to do these things, getting used to the feel and flavor of them before you can multitask on these other things. But so yeah, keep trying it. It's like, you need to be aggressive. You need to be taking initiative. You need to be doing this sort of like limit testing so that you can be more familiar with those situations and be comfortable with those situations where you can more easily adapt and more easily multitask.
Yeah, I get what you mean.
A good practice too, if you do feel like just completely unsure of like what went wrong, is to take some time to replay in the replay viewer like this and just go over like what exactly happened and just get the full story, because there's only so much information you can get from a first-person POV. So even if the same play looks exactly the same from your angle, it could be completely different based on what the rest of your team was doing, what the enemy team was doing. And could be completely different reasons why the same play doesn't work out in 2 different situations.
Yeah.
So understanding all those factors and then applying them to your next game, your next play, is all very important.
Yeah, and it takes a surprising amount of brain power to actually execute these things, right? And if you're just watching it back, your entire brain power is thinking about, like, why should these sort of things, and just the act of watching back is
get the thinking out of the way.
Yeah, it's one of those things where. Even playing Tetris, for example, a simple game like Tetris, there's often times that I've decided on a play and it's moving fast enough that I have to think about the tactics of getting that piece into position, whereas like if I had spent the quarter of a second longer thinking about should I have done this piece or is there something better, I've just found something suitable. Whereas like when you are watching your playback, you don't have to expend any brain power on tactics and you can just think about the strategy sort of thing, or just focus on whatever it is you want to focus on instead. So,
yeah.
5, 4, 3,
But you'd say watch like in this type of view, camera view, or first person?
It depends on what you're trying to work on. I would definitely start with your first person view, right? Because it's like you got to focus on your world, and if you can find things wrong from your perspective to work on, definitely focus on those things as much as you can. The things that are going to really help from looking at third person perspectives or other person's perspectives, and this is something that as like a team coach, this is something that I feel is where a coach is most valuable. It's like, especially when I'm working with like pros or top 500s, they know how to play their heroes. I'm not going to know how to play Reinhardt or the techs behind Reinhardt or Genji better than people who have hundreds, if not thousands of hours on that hero. But that person has hundreds, if not thousands of hours in that first person perspective. I'm going to help them understand how their actions make sense in the context of the first person perspective of their support, or the macro perspective of like the positioning of everyone, or in context with what the team is doing. I would definitely focus on reviewing your own perspective from the first person until you feel like you don't, it's like you're doing things right. And if you're losing games and losing team fights where you think that you're doing everything right, it might, like what you're doing might make sense in the context of your first person perspective. Whereas if you look at somebody else's perspective, you're a flaming idiot, or you're throwing, or like you could be doing something in a different way where you might be getting equal or lesser value individually, but it has more impact collectively or on a team basis. So, but to start with, I would probably say that until you're high diamond or above, focusing on individual gameplay is going to be by far the most important thing, especially because you can't really control the team at this rank. There's not everybody's going to be in comms, let alone listening. And there was one other point I had, but I lost it. Tikatee, did you have anything to follow up?
I mean, just to follow the theme of me putting your thoughts into my own words, I would say just always ask yourself why something didn't work. And if you can answer that from first person perspective, that's great. If not, you probably need a bigger context to understand all the factors that went into your death, a certain play not working out, anything. So if from your perspective, it's like everything looked A-okay, it's like, but we still lost, it's like, I don't understand why. Then you take a step back, look into third person, look into the enemy POV, look into stuff like that.
Okay.
Attackers incoming. Defend.
Do you have any questions, or do you want to keep going?
Yeah, I guess we could keep going.
You can stop us at any time for questions. This is your
Yeah,
time.
for sure.
I'm not sure what to ask. That's the thing.
All right. We will just
like...
keep going then.
All right. So again, similar compositions. Ours has a Widow though, so a little bit less frontline damage. Oh, this Zen is out for blood.
Yeah. Your Widow's gonna lose this duel, isn't she? Yep!
Yeah.
Oh, why? Why would... Okay. Do you play with headphones?
Yes.
Do you listen to music while you're playing, or?
No.
So, like, it's something, because very early on, there was like, the enemy Genji was fighting somebody on the flank, and you reacted pretty slowly to it. So
I think I was listening to my frustration.
Listening to your frustrations. Fair enough. But I mean, so there's a couple different things that you can do, but like Overwatch is a very, very overwhelming game. There's a lot of visual information. There's a lot of audio information. The audio design in this game is pretty good when they don't fuck it up and there's not some horrific footstep bugs. Usually.
And Reaper puts on his slippers.
And oh my goodness, anyway. So there have been some bugs with the audio, but overall, Overwatch audio is pretty decent. But it's one of those things where, along with kind of like the situational awareness check, you need to make sure that it's like the first step is to get as much information as possible, and then the second step is being able to actually like process that. So you can do that kind of like three ways. You can be looking around, where it's not just like looking in front of you, but like check the flanks, check behind you, look up, look down, look all around, just kind of like as much visual information. Think about where the opponent is going to be and what they're going to be doing. If you can predict somebody, you can be more situationally aware, and then also listening as well. So the listening part of things, it's like as long as you're not listening to music, that's good. I would definitely turn the music up to start with. Like you want it to be just slightly too loud, or it's going to be like where it's uncomfortable with how much is there. You almost kind of like to the point of overwhelming. Obviously, don't damage your hearing or something, but you want to be able to hear even the more subtle sounds, so that you can kind of like get used to them and recognize them. You don't want to have the footsteps too quietly or anything like that, because once you've kind of like been able to recognize those sounds, then you can be able to recognize them easier even when they're quieter. And one of the things that I also do recommend to people is to try and like just listen to a replay of their game or something like that with their eyes closed. You know, just try to figure out what's going on based off of the audio alone. And just like very simple exercises like that can help you recognize what's going on in the game. Because especially when you're having like, you know, ultimate voice lines tell you a lot. There's cooldowns have very specific sounds. Like, you know, when you get, you know, it's like you can have the point where behind a wall you can hear like an Ana use a nade, so you know she's vulnerable, or Zarya's personal bubble even makes a sound where like it is an information. It's another way of collecting information about weaknesses in the opponent. Like that's like really high level stuff. But at the very least, you know, if there's a duel happening on your flank, above you or behind you, based off of audio, you need to be able to react to that.
What should I have done instead when the Widow was 1v1ing?
Sorry? Well, this is.
I mean, the Widow shouldn't have gone.
The Widow
1v1.
should not have gone up there. And
I don't think she knew the Zen was there.
Did
Oh
she?
no, I mean I knew the Zen was there.
Yeah,
I just,
so you knew the Zen was there, right?
backing up
I don't
to,
think the
shoot
Widow
him.
knew.
Objective A.
Yeah. So this
The
is one
Widow
of those.
grappled right on top.
This is one of those weird situations where it's best to have one person on your team who's actually like good at dueling, fight that, or just ignore him and go fight the 5v6 sort of thing.
Mhm.
It can be dangerous to duel somebody who's in a position. I mean, if it's a Zenyatta, like for you going up there, especially if he lands Discord, he's going to be able to see you out of position where as long as none of you die, you can just move forward and take a 6v5 and win, and then make the Zen look like an idiot. But I mean, in this sort of situation in Gold, it's all like dealing with this is always going to be chaos, and it's one of the reasons why flanking is just so freaking effective. So I would try and ignore him as much as possible. You know, if he tries to actually threaten you, fight back, but be walking forward with the intention of fighting their front line and taking the 6v5, whereas just like making him a non-factor. If he tries to peek, shoot him, pressure him back, force him to recharge his shields, and hopefully he gets no value. But I mean, a Widow definitely should not be grappling into a Zenyatta for a close quarters fight.
Well, should I be winning? Should I be going up there and? I mean, why would Zenyatta win against McCree? That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, you should win that duel, absolutely.
You should, yeah.
Really, the only person on your team that probably wouldn't is the Widowmaker. I guess the Mercy as well if she finds a way up there. But yeah, this is more on your Widow than it is on you.
Yeah.
I guess like just communicating the Zen is there and to watch out for him. And like Jayne said, there's either the way of dealing with him by killing him or by ignoring him.
Yeah.
And you just need to make a decision as a team of which to do.
Okay.
Wait, she must have known he was there.
I'm pretty sure she did.
Then why does she grapple right on top of him? There's no way she knows, right?
I'm 90%. She
Oh,
knows.
okay,
she knows.
Well, no, well, she's grappling right now.
No, she's not. Now she is.
Okay, she cut it short to try and get the shot. She's really confident.
I think the Zen also gets the Moira. Yeah. So you're going right. And he goes. Is he gonna get the Mercy too?
Oh my god, he almost got the Mercy.
He got the Mercy as well.
And the ride.
Oh my god.
Okay, so,
I think he's carrying the game.
the Moira again.
yep.
All right.
Yep, on the flank.
Yep. What a god. What a god. Zen is dangerous in close quarters, man.
Yeah, the flank Yada.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is just a team issue more than it's an individual issue. There's just the respect for the flank wasn't there.
Beautiful.
You were the right person to deal with it, but your team didn't give you enough time to go deal with it. Nice shots there for sure. And that's exactly how you could have handled that Zen as well. If you didn't want to go up and duel him directly, move forward with the team and then take shots when he peeks.
Nice.
Oh, nice.
I remember this part. Let's just skip this part.
All right.
Tragic.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes my aim just goes out of place. I don't know why that happens. I'm not sure if you have any feedback on that.
Do you want to take that, Luke?
I guess my biggest question would be, do you feel yourself tensing up in situations like that? In like high pressure situations?
Probably, because I do a lot of practice, like on like the range and like some workshops, and I hit my shots a lot more than in actual games.
Yeah, I think, I mean, to be honest, the biggest thing behind mechanics and improving them is time. Getting more time in-game in high-pressure situations will make you better at not tensing up in high-pressure situations, right? Pretty straightforward. When it comes to training aim, there's a lot of good resources, but at the same time, there's nothing that equates to being in a game of Overwatch. And this is the same thing you deal with on a team. There's nothing the same as being in a match on game day kind of thing. The pressure is just completely different than scrims, than playing ranked, than practicing in like aim labs or whatever. So the biggest advice I can give you is just keep putting the time in, be aware of those situations and try to relax yourself and have a good mindset going into them. And try to alleviate any pressure you're putting on yourself. Don't expect to hit these shots. Don't expect to win every single duel. Don't expect to win every single game. Come into these situations, come into these ranked games with the mindset that you're here to improve, and try to lower that expectation on yourself to just ease your mind as much as you can. But yeah, the reality is it's more pressure than training range, right? That's just the reality. So you need more time in these environments.
And aiming is also going to be one of those things where it gets worse the more you think about it. Yeah, and it's where, you know, if you're thinking about trying to aim, or you're thinking about the fact that you're missing, or you're thinking about, like, if you think about how embarrassing it would be to lose a duel against a Zenyatta, it's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy. That's what your brain is simulating. Your brain is thinking about an embarrassing situation where you lose to a Zenyatta. And the brain is pretty good at kind of making those things that you are simulating or predicting come true. Where, you know, if you're really wanting to kind of just have the best mindset about duels, it's less thinking and more reacting, like more feeling about it. Just be like, you know, like it is, you know, as campy as it might sound, like visualize headshot, you know, be confident. Who's the guy who said that he plays like he just walks in like he's got the biggest dick in the room? Sort of thing. Like confidence is
probably a lot of players.
But confidence is unironically a big thing, and you have to be thinking about winning the fight, thinking about hitting the shot, and thinking about it not in the way it's like I'm going to hit the shot, but like visualizing it and feeling it, and just don't critically think about it as like, how do I aim? I need to hit this shot. It would be embarrassing if I lose, because whatever you think about, your brain and your hand is going to make happen.
I feel like that's my biggest problem.
It is for most people. A lot of people.
Yeah.
Yes, it's hard, right? This is a very, very hard skill. Go ahead.
I was just going to equate this to some of my own personal experience where I used to compete playing badminton, and there's a part in badminton where you have to serve the shuttle, and it's a very tight execution where you want to serve it as short and as tight to the net as possible. And the first thing they teach you is to never look at the net, because as soon as you look at the net, you're going to hit the shuttle into the net and lose the point. That's the same thing here. Don't be dueling a Zen and thinking it's like, I need to kill the Zen. Think about what's going to happen. And just put yourself in the moment. Just be in the moment as much as possible and visualize completing the task rather than what you need to do in order to complete the task. If that makes sense?
Yeah, no, I definitely get it. I just got to practice it.
Yeah, and if you want reading about this, you can think about, you know, it's like flow state. If flow state is this sort of situation extended over a long period of time. You know, for me, when I try and get to these into situations, I try and just like, when I'm trying to hit a difficult shot or pull something off difficult, I try and just like shut my brain down and just like think about pulling it hard and doing as much as I can. But then another thing, if you wanted to, like, you know, if you mentioned that this is something that you think is relevant to you on a much larger scale, you could look up predictive processing. It's a theory about basically cognitive processing. You know, if you're looking for some extra, I'm just going to keep giving people like book recommendations.
No, I get it. You mentioned Thinking Fast and Slow earlier, and I have it.
That's a great one. You have that book?
Yeah, no, I stopped halfway through because I just let go of things, or else it was very interesting.
Sorry, I read a message in chat. But yeah, predictive processing. I really, really like predictive processing. When I first started reading about it, it helped me quite a bit. Perform. So that was kind of like the big tipping point for me, was to start being like, you know, thinking fast, thinking slow, predictive processing. Some of the other literature around there was where I started to realize that it's like, because I think that it was one of the most fascinating things when I started working with esports pros was how many of them almost never critically thought, which was shocking to me. Like I remember was starting to work with some pros who didn't know damage numbers, didn't know cooldown numbers. They just know what they felt like, and they knew what to do, sort of thing. But they didn't know numbers. They didn't know if you asked them why they did something, they could not explain it to you. They had no fucking clue. They just knew it was the right thing to do. Instinctually, they knew that because of this, you do this. Where it's like, you have things where, like, if somebody dies on Volskaya point A, right? The pro will not, the pro doesn't know that they're going to be back in 14.5 seconds or something. They just like have this like sixth sense that around this point in time, because this person died, they're going to show back up around here at around this time, and they'll just be paying attention to that. So when it happens, they can react, sort of thing. But
they just feel it. Yeah.
They just feel that. So there is, like, in order to get really, really quite good at tasks like this, there is a way that you, like, I think that for most of us, we have to be conscious about learning how things work, but then actually trying to move that into like unconscious or subconscious performance.
But do you think that if you told that pro who, like, all these things, would that kind of like get them out the flow because they'll be thinking more about this stuff? Or, you know what I mean? Because it's happened to me a little bit where I tried to think about stuff and then I just...
Yeah.
I'd seen worse.
I had one pro react very poorly to my coaching because I was trying to get them to understand something, and I can't say what it was because it would probably identify the pro. I was trying to understand, like, I was trying to get them to do something in the game better and more optimally, because there was I considered it extremely sloppy gameplay, especially for a pro. And I was really struggling getting through to this individual, and I was asking them kind of like because the way that I coach is I like to understand a person's thought process or what framework they use to understand the game, and then build a bridge between the way I understand the game, the way they understand the game, so that I can kind of like translate my thoughts to I don't want the person to operate on my framework. They've got a framework that works for them. I'm just going to try and like translate information so it works in their framework. But I was trying so fucking hard to figure out what this pro's framework was, that I was asking him, was like, so what are you thinking about in this situation? And he actually ended up complaining to the head coach of the team that he felt like I was pop quizzing him. I'm very angry at the type of coaching that I was doing, and I was never able to get that person to explain their thought process to me. They operated entirely off of feel and instinct, and yeah, I mean there are people like that. So it's
not to say
shocking.
like this line of thinking is invalid. It's just
it's different.
A lot of people approach the game very differently.
Yeah,
and it's important to give yourself the best tools to approach it in your own way.
I think that it's very common with the people who, because like, the thinking fast is really good for approximate thinking. Thinking slow is really good for exact thinking. But it's like, in order to get these approximations, you have to play a lot. So it's like you will find this kind of play in the people who play 12, 14 hours a day, because they have seen every situation there is to see multiple times. They have seen it all before. They've tried it multiple times. They know that this is the best situation. This is what they do in this situation. They don't know why. They just know it is. If I do this, it works. And I know that it works, not because I've thought it through, but because I've seen this situation a million times. I've tried every single thing there is to do, and this is what works. And they just do that, and they can't explain it. So that's definitely a thing.
No, I agree that we should know the cooldown stuff. I was just wondering what your guys' take was on it.
Basically, there's like 20 different sides to the same coin.
Yeah.
There's a lot that goes into every decision. So judging whether or not you were right or wrong in the moment is a very difficult thing to do, I think, is the point we're trying to
Almost
get to.
impossible,
And so don't hang yourself up on being perfect once you're in game. Take time outside of the game to sort of sidebar that thinking, and then use all that knowledge you've acquired from reviewing, from getting coaching, from all that stuff outside of the game to sort of try to apply that to your unconscious thought once you're in game. And that takes a lot of time, a lot of comfort, a lot of experience, and a lot of knowledge.
Yeah.
So we'll keep watching the last 2 minutes here, but we are quickly coming up on time. But one of the things that I did want to mention is I don't think, like you said that you played really poorly in this game, and I don't think you played that poorly. I think the opponent had two very aggressive people in a duo, one or both of them, maybe smurfing or new accounts. I'm not sure. But they were definitely applying undue amounts of pressure to your team for the rank, sort of thing. So like, especially on this attack round, you did a lot of things really good. I think that probably positioning overall is the biggest thing for you, and it's like positioning, not only just like default positioning, but also the choice of positioning in order to accomplish certain things, whether you're helping frontline or assaulting backline. And then, but yeah, so that's like the main thing here is that I wouldn't beat yourself up too much. Again, it's hard to know whether or not there was a smurf, whether you sucked, whether you did really well and somebody else on your team was throwing. I mean, with the introduction of the replay viewer, the amount of like top level players who started figuring out how much win trading there was with like Zenyatta's just like floating around and not shooting, right? In the middle of a game, if your Zenyatta goes the entire game without like left clicking or right clicking, you might not notice. Sort of thing. But that stuff happens, and it's like one of the things where you're like, I feel like we have no pressure nor damage, and maybe you have somebody win trading or throwing or smurfing. You never really know. And because you can't really know, the only thing that you can really do is focus on yourself and your own improvement. And if you go into these games to improve, to work on certain things, whether or not you win or lose the actual game, you're still improving. And as chat loves to hear me say, SR is temporary, improvements forever. So.
To touch on I definitely agree at positioning and your decision making around positioning is probably the area you'll see the most rapid improvement immediately right now. So the big thing to remember for someone like McCree especially is not just your initial positioning, but like not just where you start a fight, but where you end up during and after a fight as well. Because you're not someone like a flanker who's going to get like an immediate burst value all the time when you're setting up with McCree. Sometimes it's like more of a slow roll, more of like a slow burn, doing damage over time kind of thing. So keeping that in mind and adapting throughout a team fight, making sure you're moving around fluidly, making sure you're taking opportunities when they present themselves, it's just as relevant as being set up at the very beginning of a fight.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, after this we just get rolled. So I wouldn't even know.
Yeah, the Smurfs have stopped trying to take things seriously. They know they have a massive advantage. They know they have control over this game, and they're just memeing on you at this point. So.
Mm-hmm. Hello. Wait, you think bronze for life is a Smurf?
Yeah, and it's one of those things where there is a little bit of a momentum, I suppose, to morale, if you want to call it to that, where, especially at low reloads, people give up really easily. So. Even if the game was winnable early on, people oftentimes like decide whether a game is won or lost, and then another self-fulfilling prophecy sort of thing.
Yeah.
It's one of the reasons we always scream winnable, right?
Very common. Mm-hmm.
Same, like, I think that the amount of people in my YouTube comments who get mad every time I say things like unlucky or winnable because they're like, that wasn't luck, or it's like that was not winnable. It's like that's not the point.
The Widow goes down to the Zed again.
Oh no.
It's tragic.
Yeah. I knew here would be perfect.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So for example, that Rhine charging is an example of them over-aggressing. You can counter that over-aggression by high nooning immediately.
Ooh, nice shot.
Ooh.
You're doing well here.
Right.
Yeah, so like audio, so if you an audio cue, there's a Zen right here.
Oh, I didn't even notice.
Yeah. So like, there's quite a few points in time watching this VOD where I would have been doing different things, not based off of anything you're seeing, but like things that I'm hearing. So I definitely think that, like, before you're able to figure out like what to do, you have to know what's happening, and that's going to be like the first step is improving your awareness. Like, and that is a never-ending task. Whether it's tracking ultimates will eventually lead to tracking individual cooldowns, tracking positioning, all of these different things. And audio is especially in a game like Overwatch, it's a big tool for that.
I just noticed the cameras on Hollywood have Kilrog as their brand.
Really?
That's kind of cute. Yeah, on the back there it says Kilrog on them.
Oh, you're dead.
It's a WoW reference. Oh!
Win this duel.
yeah.
Win this duel.
Oh, we're so
Win
close.
this duel. Oh no!
Tragic.
Tragic.
Realistically, he had way more resources than you.
Yeah.
So it's not expected of you to win that duel.
I wanted you to win it, but
Yeah, it was very close.
Yeah, that's where I got even more frustrated.
Yeah.
But I guess I should think like, hey, he's in a better position than me.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing you really need to know is like he got healing, you didn't.
yeah. Okay, we won't have to. This is so
Yeah.
beyond anything that's your fault. It's not even.
Yeah.
Funny,
Yeah,
but,
at this point I get it.
All right. Well, do you have any like questions or final thoughts? Of course, we'll send you the VOD, and if you have any follow-up questions, you know, it can be pretty nerve-wracking to try and ask follow-up questions on stream, and I appreciate you being brave enough to kind of do this in front of so many other people. But I think that there's probably quite a few people in chat who also got some benefit out of it, so thank you very much for that.
Yeah, thank you for the VOD.
Yeah, do you have any follow-up questions or things that are sticking in your mind right now?
I guess I would say just like, how can I get in the habit of flow more often? You know, like during Overwatch.
That's the $1 million question.
Yeah, it's going to be different for each and every person. You know, it's like I mean, there's a lot of people who don't even think that flow exists, and I think that it's different for a lot of people. But I think that if there's a fun little graph that.
Yeah, I don't want to take too much of the next person's time, so if you want to stop it here, I'm cool with that.
I will. This is a good question, though. It's a great question.
Yeah. I can recommend another, some more literature too. It's one that's been bouncing around recently. The Inner Game of Tennis.
That is a great one.
I actually have read that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, perfect. So that's all about flow state and all about sort of turning your brain off.
So there's
when you're actually in performance mode.
So this is something that I'm not screen sharing. You'll have to look on the actual screen. But there's this kind of like there's a whole bunch of these different charts where it's like challenge versus skill, where if something is too challenging, basically for your skill, it's probably going to lead to anxiety, like the anxiety about like I might mess this up against a Zenyatta, right? You're anxious about potentially losing that because the challenge is too high for your skill, and then you get relaxed or bored if you're something like, you know, shoot this Rhine shield, right? It's not very challenging and your skills vastly outweigh the difficulty of the task. And like flow state is most easily achieved when there is this like really challenging task that you're also really skilled at, or it's like at least an area where the challenge and the skill meets. You're like right on that edge. And a lot of that, at least in terms of situations, is going to put yourself in duels where you're always just barely pushing yourself to perform a little bit better. And this is the same sort of thing around like aim training, where you want to aim train at a level that's like just barely above what you can comfortably do. Whereas if you try and aim train too early on something that's extremely difficult, it's not going to do a lot for you. There needs to be like that buildup of skill. So but yeah, in terms of like how you individually, personally achieve flow, man, if you find something that works for everybody, let us know.
Yeah, I definitely will.
One thing I'd say that's consistent. I mean, I've personally, I don't think I've ever been in flow state in Overwatch. For other things, I have.
No,
but like, I don't think I've ever hit flow state for Overwatch.
I hit flow state very easy when I'm narrating things. When I don't narrate, I have too many meta thoughts. But if I narrate or shot call, I go in a flow instantly. And this happens like so. Yeah, so like I mean, the ways that I personally achieve flow is through narration or like shot calling, like just stream of consciousness shot calling. But if I'm not talking, I can't easily achieve flow.
I get that. Yeah, I've tried that too. Or I just laugh at everything.
That too, right?
Okay. No, thank you guys for the review. I'll definitely check out predictive processing and turn on my volume because it's actually pretty damn low.
Yep. Turn that up till it's just barely uncomfortable so you can hear more sounds, and you can turn them back down once you've comfortably recognizing all the sounds you're hearing.
Okay.
All right. Well, we do have another one of these to go, so we'll let you go. But thank you so much for coming on, and hope you got some value out of this review.